Welcome to One Man's Tracks. This week I got into a band that formed in Arizona in 1993. They derived their name from a drawing that the rhythm guitarist and backup vocalist Tom Linden's younger brother drew of his youngest brother Jimmy eating the world when they were children. A childish attempt at fat shaming turned band name. Jimmy Eat World is comprised of also lead singer and lead guitarist Jim Adkins, bassist Rick Birch, and drummer Zach Lind. This lineup has been together since '95, and they've released 9 albums over the time together, most notably probably with their 2001 release Bleed American, and also worth noting is the fan favorite Clarity they released in 1999. They released their self-titled debut album in 1994 with bassist Mitch Porter instead, and Tom doing all the lead vocal duties. It's got a more metallic, skate punk appeal, reminiscent of a Blink-182, a little one-dimensional, but I still dig it quite a bit, and it was certainly good enough to get them a deal signed with Capitol Records to produce this. Their sophomore 1996 release, softer, more alternative and post-punk sound, teaming up with producers West Kidd and Mark Trombino, with Tom and Jim sharing duties on vocals. They came up with a sound that starts to be what you come to expect when you hear Jimmy Eat World. This is Static Prevails. Certainly more focused and better flowing than their debut. They build it around catchy guitar riffs and driving drums, using the dynamics of both Jim and Tom's differing vocal styles as well as their dueling guitars. This may not be quite as accessible as their follow-up albums, but I still find it to be a wonderful blend of engaging styles. 12 tracks that vary in intensity, using loud to quiet transitions to hit the listener in the chest with emotional verses, then ease them into the hooks just to slap them in the face with the rockin' chorus. This album feels dichotomous in more ways than just the instrumentation, with the production at some points feeling raw and at other points a little overdone, as well as the lyrics feeling maybe more subdued and poppier than their previous, but at the same time the delivery of those lyrics feeling some of the most all-out I've heard from either vocalist. I gotta admit that when these guys were poppin' during my adolescence, I felt they were a bit too much of a generalized emo pop sound, and I was embarrassed to sing along with them. Now that I've attempted to push past my biases, I can appreciate bands like this and MCR and Panic at the Disco without cringing throughout. And seeing as how this was released in the mid-90s, its influence on the genre becomes a lot more apparent, and that generic saying that I made about them becomes more of a compliment than an insult. While it may not be their best work, I feel like it's been a little bit too overlooked in their discography, so I'd like to take a few minutes to break down some fairly top-tier Jimmy Eat World tracks that have a ability to pull me in with each time I listen to it. Kicking off with the instantly recognizable guitar riff on Thinking That's All. This opening track sets the tone not only for the album, not only for the band, but for an entire musical movement that was hugely popular during my formative years. It's simple yet effective, maybe a little bit over-sentimental, but I'll be damned if it isn't at least a little soul-stirring. You can really start to hear the basis of their biggest hit on the opening riffs of the next song, Rockstar. It's a solid, emotional rock anthem that flows really nicely into the following track, Claire, that is softer, more dramatic. It's led by Atkins this time, and it builds and builds up to this really powerful crescendo at the end. A great opening of these top 3 tracks really just set the tone and get you going on this Jimmy Eat World adventure. Call It in the Air has a solid message of taking your life into your own hands. I like the band's energy, and I love the layered vocals on the chorus, but it does feel a bit one-dimensional and almost feels like filler when compared to the classic, more dynamic and less compressed 17 that has a far more memorable chorus and a really better display of their signature quiet, loud rock sound. Now, episode 4, Digits, and Caveman make up a large portion of the listening time in the middle here. Episode 4, I believe, is a reference to the first Star Wars film. They even say outer space in the chorus. The lyrics reflect a long journey to uncharted lands. It's soft and sweet, reminiscent of an Owl City song, and it leads really nicely into the following 7-minute epic, Digits. Possibly an auditory representation of the vastness of their emotional journey, with soft, moody guitars opening and closing this one. It makes me realize just how rushed some of this LP is, especially with their rowdy, depressive number slammed in the middle of that. Then Caveman's intro makes me feel like I'm about to watch an ad for some kind of pharmaceutical company. The track itself is pretty unremarkable, but I do like the punctuation on the chorus here. Then Zach's awesome drumming brings me back in on the next track, World is Static. He is such a solid backbone for this group, with his drumming being one of my favorite elements of them. And my favorite albums of theirs are when the drums aren't too mixed in. It's gotta be clear and it's gotta be that driving force behind the whole track. Otherwise, I kind of drift off and fade away. I also really like Tom's screaming vocals on this one, and it feels like a shame that he stopped singing lead. The drums hold strong and steady through the ups and downs on In the Same Room. This one also features probably one of my favorite vocal performances from Jim. Then, with one last burst of energy, you're hit with Robot Factory. It's got these picked, reverberating guitar chords that are reminiscent of I Want You, that pull you in with anticipation and the emotion and intensity. Don't let me down here. Closing this all out with the bass-led, super sweet track titled Anderson Mesa. Light, airy guitars, simple poetic lyricism, just a lovely and impassioned end to this underrated project. They've since re-released this album in 2005 with a couple notable and complimentary B-sides called 77 Satellites and What Would I Do With You Now. I've linked that version down below there. It's raining hard out there, holy. Following this, the band would settle more into their roles with their 1999 release Clarity and their independently released and platinum-selling Bleed American. The name of that one was actually changed following the September 11th attacks to just Jimmy Eat World. Most recently continuing their unfortunately predictive album titling cycle with their 2019 release Surviving, and they were forced to cancel the back half of that tour due to the old COVID. To compensate during these difficult and strange times, they've released live Phoenix sessions of 3 of their albums. I think it's Futures, Surviving, and Clarity. So I've also linked those down below if you want to check those out. After about a week of Jimmy eating my world, I can say I connect with about half of their releases. It's sort of an up and down cycle for me. Their early stuff is obviously quite solid, and it's what made the band them. They've become a little bit more overproduced, a little bit too professional, I guess, to fit into that emo-rock sound they continue to hit on. But if you're nostalgic for that early 2000s sound, they continue to put out pretty decent records in that lane. I just start to get a little bit uncomfortable listening to 40-year-olds making music that feels like it's made for high schoolers. But that's just my opinion, guys. I'd like to know your opinion down in the comments, thoughts, feelings about this, and just any memories you have associated with the band. I'm super excited to hear about your stories, and if you enjoyed the video, leave that like, subscribe for next week's album review, watch some more. I think you'd really enjoy this Eve 6 review if you like this, and here's just a playlist of good old album reviews that I've done in the past. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time. Can't depend on honest answers.